Iranian nuclear scientist who was in Washington, D.C. just yesterday. American intel officials say they got useful information from Iranian physicist Shahram Amiri, and now he's headed home. Amiri is reportedly involved in the Islamic regime's nuclear program, so that ought to give you some idea of what the words useful information might mean. And now to the political feud between the White House press secretary and the Speaker of the House. Word on Capitol Hill is that Nancy Pelosi was furious with Robert Gibbs' gloomy assessment of the Democrats' chances to hold on to the House this November.
I think people are going to have a choice to make in the fall, but I think there's no doubt there are enough seats in play that could cause Republicans to gain control. There's no doubt about that.
Well, Pelosi reportedly calling Gibbs, quote, politically inept for sending that message. On Monday, Gibbs probably did not help his cause with Pelosi when he then responded to a question about his earlier remarks.
Do you really believe Republicans could take control of it?
I think I did what is maybe uncommon in this town, and yesterday I opened my mouth and stated the obvious.
Oh, well, Richard Socarides is a Democratic strategist and a former special assistant to President Clinton. All right, Richard, so now we got a little war unfolding between Robert Gibbs and Nancy Pelosi. Who's right?
Well, I think she's furious for good reason. I mean, this is the last kind of thing you want going into what is going to be a very difficult fall campaign for the Democrats.
Well, why is it so bad? Why is it so bad?
Well, it's so bad because, first of all, the Republicans will use it, and it'll help them raise money, and it'll help them raise enthusiasm, and it'll help the expectations game. I mean, when you've got someone from the other side saying that it looks like we could lose, I mean, it helps Republicans raise money. I mean, here is a guy. I mean, listen, everybody can make a mistake. But you are the president's #1 spokesperson. You're on the most important Sunday show that everybody in politics in America, interested in politics in America, is watching. And you go on and they ask you, could you lose the House? What you're supposed to say is, don't count the president out. Mm-hmm. He's been an underdog before. We believe in our message. And most of all, most importantly, we believe that because we have Nancy Pelosi as our leader, we are going to win. But instead, this guy, whose boss is so closely aligned with the success of Speaker Pelosi, says, you know, we think we could lose.
You know, I saw Dana Perino on Fox earlier this week, and she had an interesting take on it right after Gibbs made the remark saying maybe he had a strategy of, #1, lowering expectations for the midterm elections because everyone expects the Democrats are going to lose a lot of seats. So if he, you know, sort of lays that foundation, the White House can come out and say, oh, it wasn't as bad as we thought it was going to be. And she said maybe this was an attempt to actually rally the Democratic base by saying, hey, we're in trouble. You better get out there and, you know, get people fired up.
I don't think it was either one of those two things. I think it was just a mistake. And I think that, you know, Mike McCurry, who was President Clinton's second or third press secretary, you know, always said that when you make a mistake in that position, you know, you're always in front of the camera. You're always talking to the press every day. That's your job. You're liable to make mistakes. But when you make a mistake, you should say, I made a mistake, and take it back and apologize. I mean, it was like, who is it who said, I very rarely make mistakes, but when I do, it was a doozy? That's what he should have said. I mean, it's kind of like, you know, the two, President Obama and Speaker Pelosi are so closely aligned. It's kind of like if they had asked him, what do you think are the chances of President Obama's reelection? And if he said something like, well, you know, maybe we could lose. I mean, it's that bad.
You don't do that. And then Nancy Pelosi reportedly, again, called him inept. And then somebody who was there said, the speaker was apparently saying, I don't appreciate it. I don't know who he is. I've never met him before. And he's trying to say we're going to lose the House. What does he know, essentially? Yeah. But the fireback, Richard, was that apparently these Democratic lawmakers then said to the White House, you know, we'd be doing better if you would help us more.
Well, that's what happens. When you have a comment like that, then the blame game sort of starts. And people sort of say, well, if it wasn't for the fact that you have miscommunicated what we're trying to do, we might be better off. You get people saying, well, the president is more interested in helping the Senate, where he's from, than he is interested in helping the House. And then you even get some people thinking, you know, this is a very, very cutthroat game. And you even get some people saying, well, maybe what they're thinking is that the president would do better in his own reelection if he was running again, if he could run against a Congress controlled by the Republicans. Now, I don't think that's the truth, But when you get into this sort of game of recriminations and the blame game, which this kind of comment starts to generate, you going down a very slippery slope. That's why the best thing someone could do is just to cut it off and say, I made a big mistake, I'm sorry, it's not true.
Don't mess with Speaker Pelosi.
No, you don't want to. Listen, if I was on the White House staff, and she is probably the last person you want to offend.
All right, Richard, thank you. Well, a couple of months back, a dramatic poll got a lot of attention. A broad number of Americans concerned that we're losing our liberties and our freedoms. John Stossel did some digging and joins us today to make the case for what is really going on with those freedoms. Plus, it began as a community fight to stop a mosque from going up in the shadow of Ground Zero in Lower Manhattan. But the battle over this project is now getting national attention. In 3 minutes, we'll show you whether this thing will go forward at all.
We are not religious bigots because